I won't get into the details, folks, but have you ever had a project that just seems cursed from the start? This episode represents that for me. I have been on this site 3 or 4 times over the course of several months trying to find a good time to record the episode. And even today, I've already been here for a couple of hours, and there have been 10 or 12 different obstacles, unexpected random things that have stopped me from recording this. So I'm going to need a little bit of a miracle to get through it. And that's perhaps a bit apropos because we're going to talk about miracles today, especially inside of this beautiful church. So I got that out of my system. Let's start another lovely episode. Today we are outside of Paris, and we're in a suburb to the east known as Saint-Maur-des-Fossés. And it's like a lot of these areas, it's a village built on a previous site of a medieval abbey. And we're going to get into that because this church is a lovely remnant of the abbey, and there are some ruins in a nearby park that I want to share with you as well. So welcome to Saint-Maur-des-Fossés, just to the east of the capital. This medieval abbey began in the 7th century, to be more precise, the year 639, and it was a collection, like all abbeys, of religious buildings and housing and gardens and cloisters, priests and monks and whatnot. Sadly, the Vikings came through a little bit later on and destroyed most of the abbey, and so it had to be rebuilt. And around that time, the relics of Saint-Maur, who was a Christian saint born in Rome, were moved here to console the abbey and the villagers and also protect these areas. And as I said, they went on to rebuild the abbey. This church we're looking at is called Saint Nicholas, Saint-Nicolas, and it's from the 12th and 13th centuries, a good example of early Gothic architecture. And it's nice and quiet in there. I'm going to take you inside and show you what's on display, so to speak. For centuries, as we get a little closer. So for centuries, this medieval abbey was doing its thing, 12th century, 13th century. And people came, of course, for the religious aspect, for worship, for prayer, but also intellectuals flocked here because this abbey at Saint-Maur had a scriptorium, meaning there were scribes all day long copying these beautiful illuminated manuscripts, some of which still exist in the historic libraries of Paris. And so the abbey was considered not only a major spiritual destination for pilgrims, they would come from all over the globe, but also scholars and intellectuals would enjoy the abbey. And as we get closer to Saint-Nicolas, which is really the best preserved remnant of the medieval abbey, you can see some lovely capitals on our columns here. And aside from that flourish, the porch, as they would call it, here is not particularly fancy. But, maybe I should take that back, because how greedy do we need to be? With the fanciness of architecture, this is striking, the fact that this has been around for 800 or so years. So let me take you inside of this medieval jewel. Let me darken the image for you a little bit, or a lot, I should say, so you can really get a sense of the glorious colors of the glass here. We'll get closer to that window in a moment. We're the only ones in here, which is often the case when I visit this church, so that'll be good for our purposes of having a chat. I'll just give you an idea of the beautiful glass in this place. The previous episode I did was a live stream, meaning that while I was broadcasting it in real time, we were at the mercy of the cell phone gods, or the signal gods. And so the previous episode, like all live streams, was sometimes getting a little fuzzy and the quality was a bit reduced. But this time I'm pre-recording it, so of course, feel free to change your video settings to 1080p. This one is unique in that it's a little bit more modern, and it's got a beautiful pastel palette to it, if you can make that out. These are colors, particularly in the sky, and those sort of salmon-colored pillars. You don't see colors like that typically in the older windows. And and the rendering of the face and whatnot. That's really nice. And then this main one behind the altar. Look at that. Let's zoom in just a little bit more. Wow. It doesn't get any better than that. Love how those reds pop. I think red and blue are really the two colors that pop the most in these glass windows. And then some medallions of sorts there. Absolutely lovely. Oh, yeah. Three pillars of lusciousness is what I'm seeing here in front of me. Looking back, again, modest early Gothic architecture. Let me brighten this up for you. You can see the ceiling is not vaulted in a typical Gothic style. Of course, right above us it is. Got those ribbed vaults. And you can see the organ is modest as well. And we have one lady joining us for the visit today. But you know, Gothic, even when in its modest iteration, still had these beautiful flourishes. And I'll remind you that if you haven't heard before it was called the Gothic style, it was simply called the French style, because all of this beautiful medieval architecture was invented by the French and started just outside of Paris. Here we come to the church's prized possession, and it's in the form of a painted wooden statue that was completed around the year 1200. It's called Our Lady of the Miracles. And there was something called the Miracle of the Rain, which happened in the 12th century. And there was a drought that ravaged crops across the region. And to battle it, the local clergy here organized a religious procession of relics of Saint-Maur, which is what the suburb gets its name from. And so those relics were paraded through the city, and then afterward, the clergy gave a large mass here in this church, essentially praying for rain, praying for the drought to end. And then as they were in the church here, the parishioners heard huge cracks of thunder outside, and the skies opened up, and they say it was a torrential downpour, finally relieving the entire region from the drought. And this is just beautiful expression. And so this statue has come to symbolize not only that miracle, but several others. So she's called Notre-Dame des Miracles, Our Lady of the Miracles. She used to be housed in a previous chapel of the vast Abbey complex, and that Abbey was destroyed, so she was hundreds of years ago transplanted here. Under heavy security, there's actually a sign next to me that reminds us awesome. That was the 12 tolls of noontime. So yeah, she's under video surveillance is what I was in the process of saying. This beautiful bit of stained glass here is showing a procession of the statue through the town. Let me show you the top as well. So people would come from all around. You know, the legend of this miracle and others would lead pilgrims to come and pray for their own miracles and healings and whatnot, of course. We've got a child there that is likely very sick, and they've come for a healing. There's another window here that's not to be missed. On the left and the right, maybe you can make it out, we've got these marble plaques that's very common in French churches. They're called ex-votos, and an ex-voto was a way for the church would receive a donation from a parishioner, and the parishioner, the churchgoer, was able to give the church a message of thanks or a prayer, and then the church would engrave it and permanently place these messages of thanks on the walls, almost like marble wallpaper. Some churches in Paris have extraordinarily, just thousands and thousands of these plastering the walls, and so you can see examples of that. Many of them referencing, miracles. Thank you for a miracle in my life. So there we go, Our Lady of the Miracles. And as I mentioned later on, I'll show you the ruins of the original chapel where she was housed in the Middle Ages. What else can I share with you in here? Nice pointed arches. Nice composition with the shadow there, man. Oh, that's good stuff. Cute little door tucked away in this pillar, or tower, I should say. And they do still have Mass here, certainly on the weekends, maybe a little bit during the week as well. But it's not a heavily populated suburb. So this church, all the times that I've visited it, in my many attempts to record this episode, I've noticed that it's been virtually empty. This is a recreation of an old object that's known as the, let me show you the cross of Saint-Maur. And this would have adorned the facade of the Abbey, and I guess would have been a very well-known and famous symbol and carving at the time. It's no longer here, but someone made a more modern recreation. That beautiful interlacing pattern. I imagine that would be fun for an artist who was carving something like that, to be able to pull it off and create an object that seemed to defy the laws of the medium. And you can see it's dirty. People come here and touch, I assume, during prayer and whatnot. So there it is, our little church of Saint-Nicolas. The best remaining piece of the former abbey. What I didn't show you earlier is, as we exit that little square that we began at, has some other loveliness. When we close the door, there's a sign that asks us to close the door of the church. Okay, ça c'est fait. Look at this. That's where we started from. Look at that beautiful, tall street lamp. This gorgeous brick building is a Catholic high school. And the suburbs of Paris are just packed. If you know where to look, I mean, they're just packed with these little, like these old vestiges. And you get a real feel for an old world version of what Paris and even the French countryside could have felt like. Even though, of course, everything's been modernized, and there are apartment buildings around. But some of these areas stay very clean and classy and quiet for the most part as well. So look at this, just got some benches under the tree there. And the church. I'll show you the back of the church, and then just beyond to the right is a public park that's very lovely, and that's what's housing all the old stones and the ruins of the abbey. This right here doubles as, this street lamp doubles as a sundial. So proof of that there. Of course, the lamppost will cast its shadow on a sunny day, and here there's a plaque that looks way too smart for guys like me, and all of the explanation of the installation, how it works, how to read it, etc. Beautiful. To the right here as we walk along, you've got a few cute little eateries. I will certainly be enjoying one of those soon after. If you're watching this live on the premiere, then as usual, I'll remind you, a gentle reminder, that a great way to support this channel and this project is to fire off a super chat. If you see the $sign there next to the live chat box. Or if you're watching the replay, there's something called the super thanks, and you can click right now under the video, even if you're watching this in the future, there's a little symbol of a heart with a $sign. And that's a way that you can send a tip and also leave a comment. It's just an old courtyard, and you can see the architecture is a little worse for wear, but still pretty charming stuff. And you get instantly a sense of, you know, everything's just deliciously old around here. Oh, I don't know if I showed you. Let me actually do the pop you through the gate like the old days. And I just want to show you what's tucked away on the left-hand side in case you didn't see that building. It's beautiful. Okay, there may be people living in there, so that's enough of gawking at them with my camera. Look at this, you got an old well. The old local well. Now turned into a cute little bistro. Isn't that gorgeous, man? This is where I need to eat, actually, later on. With the backdrop of the church. And you got the bell tower up there. Yeah, this place is called Frère et Sœur, brother and sister. I'm definitely going to come back and eat here, and then I'll give you the review, the critique afterward. This is another brasserie, and they got this beautiful outdoor dining area that will probably, it's a little afternoon now, and that'll be filled up quickly. Let me show you the back of this church, which is lovely. Lovely, lovely. I guess that's the word I'm going to be using today. Some of those stained glass windows that we were enjoying from the other side. And so you've got this little sleepy suburb that has all the modern accoutrements that you would need, but of course against the backdrop of this lovely architecture. There it is again, the word lovely. I got to find another word. And then you've got the little local boulangerie and the tabac and whatnot, and the back of the church here, Saint Nicolas. So we'll say goodbye to the church and then move on to the other remnants of that abbey. As we do here, you got another corner restaurant. I'm going to wait for traffic. And another cute roundabout. Of course, nobody does roundabouts like the French. We already knew that. This with the central clock. It's beautiful. And some more of those really high up street lamps. About as charming as it can get. Speaking of charming, look here. I'll explain this artwork in a moment, but this kiosk normally would be a newsstand. It would be selling magazines and bottles of water and postcards and stuff. But this one's been converted into a little crepe restaurant, crêperie. And tell me that's not adorable. And they've got all their little terrace seating set up here. With a couple of bikes parked. And you'll notice too on the right, I mean, technically these are more modern condos or apartment buildings, but nothing too garish, nothing too incongruous, you know. It really fits in well with the vibe here. And I love it when these neighborhoods do that. Another look at the crêperie. I might have a hard time choosing where I have lunch today. So back to the sculptures here. You can see, by the way, there happens to be a dog with a pipe in his mouth. Can you make that out with a pipe? So this whole work here is inspired by the fact that there was a French film famously made on location in Saint-Maur-des-Fossés, and it was by a well-known French actor and director by the name of Jacques Tati, T-A-T-I. And Tati filmed a movie here known as Mon Oncle, which means my uncle. And so that's the obvious representation here, the main character with his, or one of the main characters, of an uncle and a nephew and a dog. I haven't seen this movie, but the fact that there might be a dog with a pipe in its mouth, I mean, might be worth it. So that was called Mon Oncle, and clearly the neighborhood is very proud of their inclusion and their involvement with that well-known French film. Let's move on. Bit of construction happening here, which is pretty much the case for most of Paris, from what I can tell. And you can see it's not far at all. This here is the public park that we are going to explore. It's going to be the back 9 of the episode. No, I do, like, maybe I'm crazy, but I do appreciate that even in these classier suburbs like this, I love this kind of pastel-y green color that they paint for their construction barriers. I mean, it could be worse, right? I like that. Maybe I'm just weird, I don't know. So this is called quite simply Le Parc de l'Abbaye, the Park of the Abbey. So just as a refresher, the original abbey here is in the 7th century. The Vikings destroy it, and then they have to rebuild. And then later on, the 100 Years' War happens between the English and the French. That was in the 14th century. And sadly, that war was very destructive to a lot of the villages and the structures outside of Paris. And so a lot of the ruins we see here are essentially a result of the battle against the English. Speaking of that, the very first thing, I mean, look at this. What a way to enter a park. Absolutely stunning. So this tower and the little bit of the wall that's next to it was part of a fortification. They had to try to protect the abbey during the 100 Years' War by building a wall, and some of these towers integrated as well. This tower is called the Tour Rabelais, or the Rabelais Tower. That refers to a Renaissance author who was a clergyman for a short time in this abbey, Mr. Rabelais. Rabelais, by the way, has one of my favorite quotes of all times, speaking about like the execution and the disease and things that would come through Paris. He once famously said, "Paris is a wonderful place to live, but a terrible place to die." And as a lover of history and what has happened to Paris and the people through all of these centuries and all the conflicts and whatnot, I concur with that. I think he pretty much nailed it. So this is named after that famous Renaissance writer, Rabelais. So this would be from the 1200s, and you can see it was, as I mentioned, part of a protection. In France, the man who would later become King Charles V of France, during that 100 Years' War, he ordered that this wall be erected to protect the abbey, and that's really gives us an idea too of how valuable the abbey was to the Paris region. And I want to show you all angles, of course. Little playground over here. So it's just one of those classic cases of, you know, kids and joggers and people who want to come read a book. All the locals, they just use this park, and they're surrounded by these old, beautiful ruins. So that's where we just walked down. The Tour Rabelais and the connecting wall. And those of us who are lovers of Paris and old stones and history and whatnot, this is This is just delicious, isn't it? It's too good to be true. When I first discovered this, I heard about it and I said, oh man, that's on my to-do list. I gotta go check out if it's worthwhile. And as soon as I got here, I knew I'd have to make an episode about this. There's a little red door there at the bottom, but of course I checked, it's locked. And one last look at that beautiful tower. So now we're inside of what would have been this vast complex of the Abbey of Saint-Maur, with all of its various components. Chapels, churches, cloisters, probably a refectory for the monks and priests. And of course that scriptorium where they were producing and copying those beautiful manuscripts. You can catch a glimpse in the center of your screen that we're headed towards some more ruins in the second section. And there happens to be an elevated portion up there. There's not as much to see up there, but it's an extra little green space. And why not practice my walking backwards skills? It's another reminder that the French really know how to do their public parks. You can see there's another path that leads you up to the upper level there. And then we get to this big beautiful gate that leads us into the second section. And we'll likely come across some gardeners here doing their maintenance and whatnot of the little the gardens that we'll see next to the ruins. Okay, here we go. You can start to see the remnants of an old chapel of the Abbey. What's the best? Let me think of the best way to give you this view. It's not just about the spot itself and the object itself, of course, it's about the approach, right? That's something to be considered as well. Ah, this is beautiful. Absolutely gorgeous. There's a view for you. That could be a thumbnail shot, I think, for this video. So what you see on the left-hand side, this larger structure, is called the Chapel of Our Lady of the Miracles. So remember that wooden statue we saw in the church? She would have originally been housed in that left-hand portion. That was the Chapelle de Notre-Dame des Miracles. And of course it would have been another popular place of worship and coming and praying for miracles and such. And then the chapel here, we'll zoom in and we'll enjoy some of those details, has a colonnade or a walkway, passage, that would have led to another portion. This building on the right that you see was built later on, many centuries later, by an owner of the land. It's like a little villa that was created. But all in front of that, before we even zoom in on all of that, they've got what the French would call a potager, or a vegetable garden of sorts. This is perhaps just flowers, but I don't know, we'll maybe get a closer look what they're growing there. Look at that. How wonderful that they didn't tear all this down at some point. Now, I need to figure out how to get in there because this, well, there's a barrier here, but then the other side is open. So because one of the entrances is open, I'm just going to assume that I can pass by the barrier. We'll be nice and respectful here. Let's zoom in a little bit because this chapel of Our Lady of the Miracles. Still has some great stuff here. You see that? So you can see the face in the center of the screen. And then there would have been a statue directly above that face, underneath that little mini canopy. And then up above. Absolutely stunning. So this is all, we're talking 12th, 13th century. And then you can assume, being a chapel, this would have been a grand stained glass window up above the altar. Now it's basically just a big nest for the local pigeons. And then a crenellated top portion there. Wow. Of course, it's a shame it's only got a couple of walls left and not much else, but how lucky are we to just have that? And then you'll have to excuse the fencing here. I can't really avoid that, but you can see the colonnaded walkway. Perhaps you would have been able to also walk along the top. It seems that yes, that would have been the case. And then something like that. Wow. It's so nice that this is still here. You know, you gotta use some imagination, of course, but that's how it goes sometimes. You can catch in the distance beyond another bit of wall there. Stupendous. Look at this well here. My goodness, this would have been, of course, the main well of the Abbey. That beautiful pulley. Wow. They don't build them like that anymore. Well, they don't build them at all nowadays, but wow. Yes, indeed. Look at the intricate, even the design of the pulley wheel itself. Yes, please. And then you got here the gargoyle of sorts here, right, where there'd be I'll get my fat digit in here if I can. Anyway, right about there's a light groove, and of course it would have been a spout that you would be able to pour the water from the big bucket into your smaller receptacle. And here it's cute, they got this one little potted plant here dangling via chains, suspended from the pulley wheel, but wow. That's the good stuff. What a treat for the locals to come and frolic here in their local park. And so this here is called La Villa Borier, in reference to the name of a family that would have purchased. I mean, this piece of land, once the Abbey had fallen into ruin, I mean, the land was purchased over and over by wealthy families, and they would make their own adjustments and refurbishings and stuff. So this is from the 1850s, this little villa. Still not too shabby. I mean, compared to what's next to it, it's ultra modern in terms of era. But of course, 1850s is still nothing to sneeze at. I see the windows are all boarded up there, so I assume there's perhaps not too much going on in this at the moment, but I wonder if they could convert that into some sort of community center or something. And then maybe let's not neglect the beautiful garden work here that these guys and gals have spent so much time working on. This is a nice touch here. These are all hand woven little sprigs, and they create this nice design, as you can see there. So well done, appreciate that. And then also, look at how, I don't think I've ever seen this before, but look at how great this lamppost is. It's a big old birch branch. And I guess it's not meant to illuminate anything, it's more just a bird's nest, but That's great. I don't know if wonder if the gardeners came across this old street lamp that wasn't being used anymore, and they figured let's turn it into a bit of sculpture for the garden. Ah, wonderful. So let's pass back through. A little more left to share with you. So we back up, because if you look over here, there is this definitely qualifies as a ruin, not much more than that, but it's a pillar or a pilier from what would have been yet another church that would have been integrated into this abbey complex. And you can see, so one of the supporting pillars there, it looks like the base of something on the left. And of course, these would have extended up. You'd have a vaulted ceiling, and perhaps we would have been standing inside that church back then. And it's pretty worn. I mean, this sucker is a good 750 years old or so. So you can see it used to be ribbed. Used to have those ribs carved into it, and a lot of them have just worn away. This is all limestone, and limestone does a good job for a while. It's certainly not like granite that will last forever, but yeah, give it up for this one pillar that stood the test of time. Not only survived history, but survived the potential new owners of this place and the city itself, who could have decided to just get rid of it once and for all. And it's kind of interesting to note that, so this I mentioned is about 750 years old, and then this beautiful tree, there's a sign that tells us it's 150 years old. So that's an interesting contrast to play with. 150 years and 750. And there's a little bit more of a forested area back there, but essentially you get the gist of it for le Parc de l'Abbey of Saint-Maur-des-Fossés. And perhaps I'll just take you along as I exit the park for a few more visuals. Hopefully you agree with me that finding little treasures like this is an absolute treat and a real privilege. Just a little over 4 miles beyond the eastern edge of Paris. I do have one other fun thing to share on the way out. It's something that caught my eye earlier. It is not authentically from the era that we're talking about, but it's a modern carved door that clearly is going for a medieval feel. And I think that's pretty charming. Some classic fleur-de-lis action there. So that's nice. Looks like a fun project for a local woodworker. And we'll make our way out of the park. So hopefully you enjoyed this. This is an area, I think it's safe to say, without any sort of pretension or bragging, that you're just simply, as a tourist, as a visitor to Paris, you're simply never ever going to come out here. And I didn't even know about it for years. And but yeah, as you can see, if you're a lover of these old stones, it's you could do a lot worse. Not too shabby at all. And this central alley almost gives you a sense that you're walking toward a grand chateau. And I love it. In fact, there was a chateau here after the Abbey had come and gone. But then the chateau came and went. So that's the nature of things. And whatever era you happen to be plopped down onto planet Earth during as a human being for your handful of years on this planet, you get to enjoy whatever iteration happens to be coming and going throughout the course of history. And how about we just finish up with the tower. The Rabelais Tower from Saint-Maur-des-Fossés thanks everybody. And I will catch you on the next one. If you want to contact me or book a tour with me in Paris in person, then you can find all of that info in the description. As always, if you can't bring yourself to Paris, I'm going to do my best to bring it to you in various ways, at various locations, and I will catch you on the next video. Take care, everybody. All the best to you. Bye-bye.